Hi, Martin. Welcome to Drill Talk. Thanks for joining. I've always sort of appreciated your insights and comments and posts and things on social media and your website, VO2max Coaching.com. So I thought you'd be a good guest to have onto the show because I basically invite people on that I want to talk to. So here we are.
It's an honor. Thank you very much. Yeah, I like talking about running. I like talking about coaching, and I like talking to runners about coaching.
Perfect. Well, then
that's my job. My job is talking, as you'll find out shortly.
Correct. So, I mean, I think it's always like important. There's so many coaches and things now, but there's very few coaches that have such good experience as running but you're one of them. You have 20 plus 25, I don't know, years of competitive trail, mountain, terrain, let's call it, running under your belt. Maybe just for the purposes of the audience to set the scene, because a lot of this would have come before social media and things like that. Just give the audience a little bit of background info on maybe some of your career highlights as a runner. We'll not spend all day about it, but let's give us the 5 minutes on this one.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay, the pressure's on there. Yeah, I mean, my running career started before computers. I started running when I was just very small because I think back, I grew up in the 70s, and kids were just really active. Kids weren't allowed in the house. We were just kicked out of the house. We just go and run around. So you're sort of training from a very young age. Now, I think I joined the running club. I grew up in Leicester, which for non-English people is a city near Birmingham in the middle of England. Just a very industrial working class type city. No hills, very flat. So I joined the running club there. So I started being coached when I was 12 years old. I started doing workouts when I was 12. And I did a lot of track. I did track and road. But my coach, the coach, I had the same coach for maybe a long time until he died, really, at least 20 years. Yeah, he basically, my nickname was the cart horse, because I was a bit chunky and small. And so, and running around the track, I looked like a cart horse. But for whatever reason, because I had these kind of tree trunk dinner lady's legs, straight down, quite thick and no muscle. They were really good on the cross country, so my thing was always cross countries. I guess to cut a long story short, I ran a lot of roads and a lot of cross country in those early days up until my late 20s, I guess. And through that time, I was coached mostly by this one guy, a guy called Paul Blissett at Leicester Corritanians. Yeah, and that's kind of where I learned how to run. Running is a skill. I think a lot of people don't really appreciate that side of the mechanic side, the form side of the sport.
So what about the actual highlights in your kind of competitive running? What stands out to you there?
I guess in the first half of my career was spent road running and cross country. So I think like road running, it's a real meritocracy. All people care about is time. So I ran 63 for the half marathon, just under 29 for the 10K. Never ran marathon. I was stuck to shorter distances. That was my thing. Low 14s for the 5K. Not so great. Yeah, I was more of a, I wasn't a real speedy guy, so the shorter it got, the less competitive I was. The half marathon, 10K, is kind of my thing. And then, I guess it was maybe in the late 90s, I was trying to make it as a pro runner. It's very hard, I was racing a lot in France and Italy. And, I'm running 63, 64. To make money, I needed to be running 61, 62 in the halves because, there's a lot of Africans, a lot of very good Italians and, the real all sorts of nationalities, lots of Russians back then racing in Europe. So it's very hard to make ends meet. And then by accident, I went to New Zealand, I think in '98, and did a mountain race. It was just, I just destroyed it. I don't know. I hadn't really trained for mountain running. But it's basically a bit like Mount Snowdon, but a bit longer. It was like 1,300 meters up, 1,300 down. Yeah, and I was really good. I smashed the record. It was only a small race, but it made me think, hang on a minute, maybe I should do some more of this. So yeah, and after that, I kind of, I stuck with the cross country and rode in the winter, but my times weren't as good. And I focused purely on mountain running in the summer. And sure enough, from 98, 99 was a bad year. I had an injury, but after 99, I just got better and better and better in the mountain running. And I was winning just about every race I started. The only guy I couldn't beat was Jonathan Wyatt. If that name doesn't mean anything to your listeners, they should maybe Google.
I think it will.
Jonathan Wyatt, he was the greatest uphill runner there's ever been. Yeah, there's no question. But it was like, trying to race Kipchoge. When he was at his best, nobody can beat Kipchoge at his best. You're racing for second. But the thing was, okay, so ultra running wasn't a thing then. There were ultras. Everybody did these short races up to mountain marathon distance. So the big races then were maybe 10 to 12K uphill races and races like Ciezanal. Yeah, that kind of thing. So, and very much in Italy, Switzerland, France, this Germany, Austria, this sort of region was where that was like, there's always very good money in these races, very good prize money, lots of appearance money. So it was kind of I kind of call it the golden age of mountain running. It certainly was that type of mountain running, because since then, obviously those shorter races are a lot less popular. A lot of the races I did don't exist now, and they've been replaced by ultras. Like 50 milers, 100 milers, and now where everybody's focus is in mountain running. Yeah, I guess in terms of highlights, I've been third at Ciezanal. That was a highlight because I didn't. Sometimes the highlights are usually the races where you don't expect anything to go well. And because I was better at short races, that was cool. Second in the Jungfrau Marathon, that was one of the very big lucrative races in my day. That was a highlight. I won 2 mountain.
Still a big race, that.
Yeah. I mean, prize money's gone. Back in the early 2000s, it was. Yeah, if you won that, you go away with 20 grand. It's like 5, I think, or 6. Not really kept up with inflation. That one. It's the way. That's the way of things now. It's different. Yeah. So I won 2 World Cups, which is the World Cup is a series of short races spread over the season, and the original World Cup in mountain running, the races were in ski resorts where they had the World Cup in the winter for skiing. So there'd be a race in Val Gardena, a race in Zermatt. There was a race in Lenzerheide in Switzerland. And it followed the same point system as the skiing World Cup, because a lot of the race organisers, were organising the skiing in the winter and the running race in the summer. And it made sense because in the summer, those resorts are kind of dead. So they wanted to bring in some tourists. So, the Lenzerheide, they have mountain bike downhill World Cups there as well, in the summer, just to keep the resort going in the off season. I mean, 4th in the World Champs for mountain running. That's my best. I mean, they're my best results. But I don't know if my career highlights aren't the best results. The greatest races I've done were like the most emotional and the most fun I've had have been like since I was less serious about racing and making money. I run Comrades Marathon few years ago. I mean, that's an ultra. It's in South Africa. It's 90K. I think that's the most extraordinary thing I've ever done. That was definitely a highlight. To be able to
Did you do an up or a down year?
Sorry?
Did you do an up or a down year?
I did an up year. It was 29. That was kind of emotional. I get emotional thinking about it, in fact. When you've had a good experience, because when you think about it, it's like, you feel yourself go a bit goosebumpy. That was one of them races, and it was actually yesterday. I mean, I'm now coaching people who do this race. Yeah, it's kind of, if you're an ultra runner and you have to travel abroad to do a race, that's the race you should do. That's all. I know it's on the road, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's the history of the thing.
What was it made it so special?
I don't know.
For you?
I don't know. It's the vibe. It's the history. It's the, it's one of these, it's kind of, sometimes you can't put shit into words, can you? I don't know. I know, but I don't know anybody who's done it and said, oh, that was boring. It was a road race. Everybody's like,
that's true. Yeah. Anyone that's been there seems to rave about it and be a real evangelist for it. And you should do this. It's amazing, and the whole country gets behind it. So it must be a real vibe. And to have that in ultra running is very rare.
Yeah, it's like it is. It's because South Africa are just mad about 2 or 3 sports: rugby, cricket, and running. You maybe don't think of South Africa as a running nation, but everybody runs. It's like they're mad about running. And it's because they've got such a great history of running in the country. There's I don't know any other race, maybe Boston, a couple of the big marathons that are over 100 years old, but that's an ultra marathon and it's been going on 100 years. It's crazy to think about that. And that shows how passionate they are that they've kept this thing going. And there's other races there as well that have been going nearly as long in the mountains. There's a race called the Harrismith Mountain Race. It's like an ultra in the mountains in the Drakensberg, I think. Yeah, that's been going longer than any race in the US. Really, it has. They've got this ultra running, marathon running. They've got this amazing sort of, the community's great because everybody's into running, but they've also got this great history, and they're very proud of that, And they want to keep it going. They're very protective of because obviously they've gone through shit we can't imagine with apartheid. They've gone through stuff that, it's just horrible what all those, the blacks and the whites, everybody had a rough time, through the years there. And the fact they've come out of it and they've still kept these traditions going is, pretty cool. But
the Ultra Trail Cape Town is a race that always seems to get such a great reception from all of the athletes. They also have, I think, one of the best live streams is in race coverage. It's really professional, and they have a non-running related sponsor of the event as well. It seems like it's a top tier level Ultra Trail.
Yeah, it's sponsored by Bang. Yeah, I know some people will boycott the race because it's sponsored by Bang, but the thing that makes this such a great race is because it's got a big sponsor. They put in lots of money, so you can. I haven't done the race, but I've obviously coached a lot of people for that race, and they all, we want to go back. Nobody's ever said, that was a shit race, I don't want to go back to that. It's just amazingly well organised, loads of aid stations, everybody's just like crazy. To look at, they just really look after you. And I've ran the course. I spent the winter in Cape Town, and I didn't do the race. I was there too late. But I ran the course in stages, and it's brutal. It's very technical, real tough course. That I'd like to go back and do it, but it's kind of a scary one because it is. It can be very hard and it's very technical and some very steep climbs early on as well. You can really get that race wrong.
It does look like a good event.
Fantastic city, Cape Town. Yeah, I mean, if I have to leave France, if my residency ever runs out here in France, yeah, that's where I'll be living. I got a plan B. If the French kick me out, that's where I'm off to Cape Town. It's I don't like cities, but it's a city, but it doesn't feel like a city. It's got these huge mountains. The only city like it I can think of is Wellington in New Zealand, because they got these suburbs and there's all these big mountains, 1,000 meters plus all around. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, Wellington is a nice spot. I've been through New Zealand myself. So, I mean, moving on to the coaching side, you still in the kind of the introductory phase of the interview, but you have coached a lot of sort of top athletes, and backing back to Ultra Trail Cape Town, I think you coach Robbie Simpson. What are kind of some of the highlights you've had then as a coach in the kind of ultra or trail running world?
Again, that's kind of hard to answer. I mean, because the highlights aren't just, sure, Robbie's won. Robbie's probably got the best record of anybody in the UK in mountain running. He's run like 10 CS and hours and an average of like 2:33 or something. But it's not just, guys like that winning races it's good for the ego. But, I also coach people who are kind of new to the sport, and seeing them actually go from not being able to run 10K very well to finishing, a marathon or a sub-ultra trail race. That's kind of just as rewarding, Like there was a girl I coached. I don't work with her now because her life kind of got very busy. But yeah, she is an Australian girl, and she wanted to run for the country, and I got her to the point where she's good enough to run for Australia, and she ran in Thailand in the World Champs for Australia. That's just as rewarding to me as Beth Pascal's win at Western States. Yeah, everything every day every race, every weekend there's a highlight. Because it's I wouldn't say it's a thankless task, but it's a kind of very emotionally draining thing, coaching. And the payback you get is that you actually see people like doing kind of amazing things and achieving. I know this is the most hippie thing I've ever said, but achieving their dreams, and it's it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And that's what when I started coaching in early 2000s, and I was coaching track. I was worked with a few triathletes, and some of the guys were Olympic level track runners, marathon runners. So I never saw myself in the future coaching ultra runners, because ultra running wasn't a thing. I knew who. This is like the early 2000s. I knew who Yanis Kouros was because he was a really well-known figure, and I'd read research. I worked in research at that time, and I'd read research on Kouros, on his race nutrition, that kind of thing. That would have been a nice segue, wouldn't it, into nutrition? But
so we'll circle back.
We'll circle back to that. But yeah, I'd never realised, because nobody predicted this explosion in ultra running. So I always thought, I'd be a career coach, work for UK Athletics, coach Olympians all my life. That would be me. But then, obviously, your life is chaos, isn't it? You never know what's going to happen. Yeah, so, for a million different reasons, I ended up coaching ultra runners. But that is so much. I still coach marathon runners. I coach a girl who does 3K, 5K. I still coach various distances. But, coaching ultra runners is a whole nother, it's a whole nother thing. We're not designed to run ultras. As humans aren't designed to do this stuff. Running half marathon, we're good at that. That's our distance. That's what physiologically we're designed to do, really, half marathons. Ultras is another thing. So you get, if you start coaching a novice and they want to run, UTMB, it's like getting someone who can't run 10K to the point where they can do that. It's just, that's something I've got from the sport that I never thought I would. You know, it's always a highlight when people finish ultras. Just finishing an ultra is such an achievement. You know, I had two of the guys I work with ran in the Swiss canyons at the weekend. You know, Harry's ran a lot of ultras and he's finished most of them, but the girl hasn't been running ultras very long, and you know, she's had a lot of injury issues. And the last ultra she ran was in Nice, the one down here, and she had to drop at 100k in while she was still in second place. So she's had really bad luck. And so it was just amazing to see her finish that race. You know, it was such a cool thing. The highlights tend to be the most recent stuff. Like yesterday's Comrades that was emotional. That was, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's always great when, I coach, you know, these great runners I work with win races. That's always nice, you know. So, but it's nice in a different way. It's just a fucking relief that they finish it, because I'm more relieved.
That's how we all feel. That's how we all feel.
Yeah, it's just like I'm not partying and opening the champagne. I don't feel like that. It's like, thank God that went well, you know, because you know how much people put into it, and with ultra running, you don't have lots of chances. You can't run a race every week. You know, you maybe got 2 big races a year, and some B races are a bit shorter. So, yeah, it's like everything's focused on this one thing. You know, all the eggs are in the same basket. So it's such a relief when they actually nail it.
So I read something on your website, and I'll just read out the quote. Maybe you could elaborate on it. I thought it was an interesting point. Growth comes from letting athletes wrestle with their own thoughts and actions and make mistakes.
Wow. Did I write that? Is that...
You did. That's a direct quote.
Is that from the... just my blurb?
It's right. Yeah, it's from... I read it on one of your blog articles. Can't remember which one.
Okay. Yeah. Can you repeat that, please? I wasn't really
Growth
comes... Sorry.
From letting athletes wrestle with their own thoughts and actions and make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm talking about, you know, that's kind of one of the key principles of coaching is, if you are to develop, like, okay, so, I mean, a disclaimer, I tend to only work with people who are ambitious. I don't care where their starting point is, but I don't want to work with someone who just wants to get fit. I can't coach every single person and cater to every single different type of runner. I was an elite athlete. I got that mindset. So I want to work with people who are like similar to me and that they're ambitious. You know, it may be to run a 4-hour marathon. You know, it's not always to make the Olympics. In fact, I don't coach anyone who wants to make the Olympics at the moment. Like, those guys aren't coming to me. But, yeah, but the whole point is that in order to develop as an athlete, it's not just about the training, the running side of things, you know, the physical, you know, your body adapting to stress of training. Growth is also about psychological development. And I think that's what I'm talking about there. You actually have to coaches are kind of teachers. The coaches, that's the main part, that you're trying to teach the athlete to learn about training, learn about racing. Because if all you do is just spoon feed them everything, they're not going to learn anything. So, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but you learn a lot more from failure, you see. I think a lot of coaches are afraid to put athletes into races unless everything is going really well, because they want to make sure that they don't have a bad race experience. But my view has always been you learn just as much from failing in a race, from DNFing, from running slow time or whatever, as you do from winning every race. We are achieving your goals all the time. I mean, yeah, I'm struggling a bit here because, like in ultra running, it's very different to the skills you need for ultra running are very different to if you're running on a 5K or something. But certainly in ultra running,
there's even more reliance on the mental, and there's even more to learn, I think, whenever it goes wrong with ultra. And you have so few,
Yeah.
as you say, so many less chances to practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a very difficult quote to talk about in isolation.
So going back,
you can tell, but yeah, I mean, you're not, coaching. You're not just trying to make somebody faster or stronger. You're trying to make them a better person. That's what coaching's kind of about. Again, this is a real cliche, but it's like trying to you want the person to become the best version of themselves. Yeah.
I've always personally
Kind
found
of
that
hard to
the
explain
best
without.
coaching relationships have been when I've been learning stuff rather than just being developing
Yeah.
and getting better. Like, I want to know why, but not all coaches will help you learn the why.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's a lot of learning. A lot of what I do is people get, they get a training program kind of thing, and then they do the training. And sometimes I just let them make mistakes. And then, because not big mistakes, not like fall off a cliff and break a leg, but just do stuff wrong. Because if you let people do stuff wrong, then, they learn. That's a good way to learn. That's how, when you're, it's like you're teaching, teaching kids. Yeah, you don't just make them just read books all the time and do exams. I mean, maybe you do now. It was like that in my day, but yeah, it's a two-way thing. You ask people to train, you see how they interpret the training you give them, you see how they respond to that, and then you say, let's do this slightly differently next time. Because that didn't go very well because you did X, Y, and Z in, a way that wasn't quite optimal. The thing is, I'm coaching adults as well. So you have to give them some autonomy. Because what a coach is trying to do is make themselves redundant. I'm trying to pass on all this shit that's in my noggin onto the athlete. And then hopefully not hopefully, I've been coaching Robbie like 12 years, but hopefully, in X amount of years, they should be able to be completely independent and train on their own without my input. And it's at that point maybe my role changes. I become more of a buddy and less of a dictator. But I'm not really a dictator. But initially that you have coaching is also an experiment. It's an experiment. It's a very shit experiment. Just one person, because there's no right or wrong way to train. There's loads of different ways to train, and some athletes respond really well to one type of training, and some athletes respond really badly to that type of training. So you've got to constantly experiment with these different types of workouts, different volumes, different intensities, just different approaches. And if you're not kind of strict initially, say, right, you've got to follow the program because we're trying to learn here, then the experiment fails, But also, that's part of the process, because what you're also trying to do when you give an athlete a program is see if they actually enjoy the training. It's not about whether they can perform, a threshold session perfectly or not. It's whether they actually enjoy it. So coaching's not just about how the athlete responds. It's how much they enjoy. Because, some people really hate doing treadmill training. Like ultra runners don't like running up a mountain on a treadmill. But surprisingly, there's a couple of very good people I coach prefer the treadmill hill reps to real world hill reps.
You don't coach me, but I love hills on the treadmill. It's the only way the treadmill is bearable is by sitting in a higher zone, doing some work.
Yeah, see, it's really a real tricky one, that. But yeah, you're trying to work out what makes the athlete tick and what pisses them off, because there's no perfect system. Certainly in ultra running, I don't use systems. I don't use a scientific systems approach. The first thing I need to do is learn to get to know the athlete find out what they enjoy, what they respond to, what they don't respond to. You're trying to find out their weaknesses. That's why it's quite often good to let people fail, because, some athletes you'll say, I'll go and do a 6-hour run, and they'll do 8 hours. That would be sort of your type 1, very obsessed, sort of the more, they just think more is better, that type of person. Then you're like, yeah, okay, so this is a person I need to hold back from time to time. And so other people...
Quite a lot of those people in ultra running.
There's lots, yeah, because ultra running does attract type 1s. Also, Jim Walmsley, I don't know if you've probably seen the movie, but yeah, it's classic. I love Walmsley. I don't love him. That sounds a bit gay, doesn't it? But I really admire Walmsley because he experiments on himself. He's not coached. He experiments with stuff. He works it out himself. And I love athletes like that, who actually they're prepared to make massive mistakes and just fuck shit up to find the answer and do it on their own. I mean, I was a little bit like that myself when I came into mountain running, because I had lots of guys. I worked with some great coaches when I was on the road, some of the best coaches in history. But mountain running, I was kind of on my own. I had to just work it out on my own, because I came from Leicester. I mean, there's no mountains, and I quit my job and went to live in the Alps. I was living in a tent for years, just running the races, pedaling around, between the races.
So, how did you figure out what type of experiments were you doing with yourself? For viewer context, you were coached by Hinato Kanaba and Arthur Lydiard, two of the greats. Even people on the periphery of running would even know their names. So, what did you learn in those days that you then started to apply to yourself? What were some of those experiments?
Well, it's kind of like that. It's the classic stuff. The first thing you do is, right, I'm just going to train my ass off, So you go out there and you just run 4 or 5 hard workouts a week. Lots of volume, lots of intensity. See what happens. Because that's if you're an obsessive runner, that's your default. Your default is to train and train and train. And the thing was, because I was pro runner, you've got all the time in the world. When you're not running, you're just eating or sleeping. So it's kind of justifiable. So, I mean, that was the first thing. I wasn't doing this on my own. There was another guy in the late 90s, a guy called Billy Burns, who he won Sierre Zinal. He was a great mountain runner, 3rd in the world champs. Also Commonwealth Games marathon runner. So we were together. We did a lot of this experimenting. Billy, what was interesting is Billy was into the long stuff. So he'd do some of the sky races and Sierre Zinal. I was doing the shorter races. So we weren't really treading on each other's toes, but we were kind of sharing ideas. And yeah, I mean, I guess one of that whole high volume, high intensity approach didn't work at all. Because we're camping high up, we're training at altitude, we're racing a lot. So I found I was always fatigued going into races, and the race performance never improved over the season. So, I mean, that was kind of the first year I did that was 1998. It just didn't go well. I had 1 or 2 amazing runs. I won a big race called the Matterhorn Lauf. But I also had some real crappy runs where I was finishing the 30s, and that was just because I was overcooking it too much in training. And then you're like, well, we need to figure out, why is this happening? So, yeah.
High volume plus lots of intensity plus sleeping at altitude sounds like you're burning a lot of matches.
Yeah. So I mean, I could talk all day about what we got up to and all that stuff. But I mean, I think the 2 most important things I learned was, 1, to train very specifically for the races I was doing. Because I was just doing, most of the races I was doing were 1 hour uphill races, so VKs as well. I was with Billy doing 3-hour mountain runs over fairly dodgy peaks, there was some of the stuff we got up to I wouldn't risk anymore. It was just stupid, but very dangerous. just running over. Yeah. Well, the nature of the sport was different then. There were sky races that went 4,000 meters, and there was no mandatory kit. You just run with a bum bag with some gels, vest and shorts. I mean, yeah, a lot of fun, but also you couldn't, can you imagine? Like, no, you can't. I don't know. We don't live in that world anymore.
No, definitely not. Out of interest, what was the gel of choice in those days?
There weren't many around. I think the one I remember was called Lepin. It was, I don't know, the triathlon brand, Lepin. Lepin it was called. All the gels are very watery. So they're a bit like those, a bit like the SAS Hydra gels or the High Five gels. But there was nobody really, there was no structure to it. You just had some gels. You just ate them when you felt a bit peckish, kind of thing. But what I worked out was, if you're going to train for Sierra now, it's got a 1,600 meter climb. So most of your training should be for a 1,600 meter climb. Being able to run that, maybe just below threshold really fast. So I remember the year Billy won, we must have ran that climb to Chandelin at Sierra now like 10, 12 times. Because we camped at Chandelin, we'd jog down and then just hammer it up. We'd do that twice a week. I think the other thing we learned was we don't train hard in the summer. So all the hard training we did over winter. So I'd run cross country. Yeah, he was living in Switzerland at the time, so he might do some cross country skiing and some ski mode. But we run cross country road from October all the way through to May. Get really fast, really strong. Then as soon as come out to the Alps, and that's it. No hard training. You just race every week, every second week. And in between, a lot of cycling in between. We were cycling between races. You do a race, maybe have to cycle 500k. So you do that over a couple of days, and that's your training. And then you just do some easy running. No more. We didn't do any hard workouts. Certainly not at altitude. I remember we started one before the World Champs. It was in Germany in 2000. And we were training together in this place called Betmerel, which is 2,000 meters. It's by the Aletsch Glacier. It's above Creek, and you'll know it.
Yeah.
I'd had a bit of a word with my coach about training for this World Champs because it was my first one. And he's like, do some workouts, do some hill reps. And I hadn't done any all summer. And I said to Billy, this is what we're doing. And we did the first rep. And we both got to the top of the hill, and we were just on our backs, and we've been racing each other. And I says, I'm not doing another rep. That's it. I'm just going to bugger myself here for the race. And he's like, I agree. No more reps. We don't need to do this shit. Let's just go for a ride. And we went for a ride. Yeah. That's how it is. I think if you're racing a lot, you don't need to do workouts because the races become the workouts. I like to look at how other athletes train that I don't coach. So, like, I don't know, over all distances, I might look at what Petter Engdahl's up to, or, in the ultras, I look at what Remy Barnet's up to, in the marathon stuff. And Robbie works with Jacob Atkin, and he does the shorter stuff. So you can kind of see what did they do. You look at their good races and what did they do in the run up to that, and the races where they have a shit one or drop out. Say what did they do, and the patterns just so obvious. The patterns become so obvious if you're used to looking at training. It's like, if you're doing too many hard workouts and racing a lot, you don't race consistently. And that was very good for the when I first started coaching, that was all very useful because I was coaching these shorter distances. That is, of course, ultra training is very different. If you're only racing 2 or 3 times in the season, then you can do hard workouts between the races. But in terms of if you have a race season where, I was racing 30 times on some seasons. I think I had 32 races was the most I did in one season. And that was in 2002, I think. And you don't need to train. You just need to keep in condition, you need to just maintain muscle tension. There's a lot of, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if you know much about the idea of muscle tension, but yeah, there's a lot of talk and a lot of theories about that in coaching, because it's all tied in with the idea of tapering for races. And, you know, tapering's a kind of very personal thing, tapering. Some people like a big 3-week taper, some people don't taper. That can often be the trickiest part of it. But I think a lot of whether you taper successfully or not is whether you can maintain good, keep your muscles in condition and keep muscle tension there. Yeah. I think it's very easy to just back off too much, and you end up just feeling lethargic and with no bounce going into a race. I mean, that's what.
So, what do you think are the what are the things to look out for, or how do you gauge that with an athlete to find? It seems like maybe the taper thing is personal to each athlete. Like, what are you looking out for to find or to keep this muscle tension?
It's a really good question.
I mean, I feel like I need to, if I take I hate taking a day off. If I take a couple of days off, I feel like I need to, there's something goes a little bit. I would rather have a rest day where I just go out and do like a 30-minute run with the dog than actually take a day off from total running. Because I find like the day that I go back to running, it's like I've taken a mini step backwards or something.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the way I work now, like, so I'm a coach remotely, basically. I'm not coaching a group of athletes here in the village. Coaching's observational, okay? Real coaching is observational. So real coaches, they work with a group of athletes. In America, it might be high school team, university team. And this is how I coached. When I started coaching, I coached at a club in the UK, and I also did some coaching at Bath University, which at the time was a bit of an academy for middle and long distance on the track. So you watch the athletes train, and you once you know them really well, you can see the ones that are bouncy, the ones that, I mean, you know, look good, and you can see that people are having a bad day, and then you go and talk to them, and so you can actually see it when you're coaching in the real world. You can see if people are looking bouncy, and then you make the connections. You're like, okay, so he's not bouncy because he's just had exams and he didn't even do any stride outs this week, so that's why he's looking a bit flat. You know, so that's the easy way to coach. But obviously, I'm not coaching like that. So what I rely on is self-reporting by athletes to say how they're feeling. The athletes fill in. I tried, like, obviously, compliance is kind of tricky. When you're asking to fill in, to write lots and lots of stuff about themselves every day, like a diary, compliance is a bit of an issue. But the best people are very good at writing about how they're feeling, how bouncy they are, how poppy they are. Part of my job is to teach them ways to report this and to actually understand their bodies and understand how they're feeling. So that's kind of how I do it. So you just experiment. So some people respond really well to, say, running drills every day. So sprint drills. I mean, I'm assuming everybody knows what sprint drills are. Most of the people I coach do sprint drills.
Let's assume.
Yeah, we'll have to assume that, yeah. And if not, just Google it and work from there, sprint drills. And that's a good way of I know when I do drills if I'm on a good day or not, if I'm feeling bouncy and if it's worth doing a workout. That's one of the things I learned from Canova was, you don't stop paying attention to the athletes when the workout starts. You want to look at the athlete before the workout starts, before the workout starts. Yeah, and one reason we do sprint drills is to see if someone's ready to do the workout. So I like people to do the drills, report back on that. And there's also stride outs. I use stride outs after easy runs generally. And again, during an easy run, you're just plodding along and you may feel a bit rubbish. But then, because mechanically, easy running's not great for your mechanics. Mechanically, you're running so slowly that it can almost be uncomfortable. So, but when you do the stride outs, so sometimes, you know, if they feel rubbish, it's like, yeah, okay, this person's quite fatigued, whatever. But quite often, this is more often the case, after an easy run, they do stride outs and they feel really, the stride outs go amazing. And they're like, oh yeah, I felt like Usain Bolt today, whatever. I just felt really quick. And it's through experimenting like this and getting athletes to feedback with all this qualitative, subjective information constantly that you work out eventually how to maintain this idea of muscle tension, what workouts, what volume of intensity an athlete needs to do to keep fresh, but also to keep the muscle tension there. So they start the race just feeling awesome. Because that's the trick is, certainly in ultras, confidence is the only thing that matters going into a race. Nothing else matters. If you're not confident, you're fucked. You know, so everything you do as a coach of ultra runners you have to be working on making sure that athlete feels confident, that their training's gone well, that they're in the best shape possible on that start line, and that this is part of it. You know, this is why the whole being a coach, being a teacher is so important. Because you have to learn, you have to understand the athlete to actually get inside their heads in order to get them to that start line feeling 100%. Because, you know, I've never been on the start line of UTMB, but that's got to be fucking scary if you're an elite athlete on the. That's got to be. There's all these questions. I mean, I've done Western States. That's the longest I've ran, but I wasn't an idiot athlete when I did that. I wasn't nervous. I was just looking forward to experiencing this thing, you know. But if you're there and you're trying to win it or finish in the top 10 or whatever, then my God, you can't have an ounce of fucking self-doubt going on, you know. Because any anxiety, it just translates into over-arousal. And you've seen the start of UTMB, like you've done it, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of times.
But you've probably not been on the front running 6 minutes a mile out of town. Like that's
No,
what happens when
I was
you're
at
not
the front
confident.
I was at the front of the second wave.
Right, you know, that's what happens if you're not confident. You end up over aroused, and you just tend to hammer it early on in these big races. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting last year. You know, I was watching it last year, and you know, Jim was like 5 rows back, just very relaxed. You know, he wasn't off with Petra Engdahl, whoever it was, sprinting out of town. You know, that's unconfidence. People who start the race aren't confident. I think that's the most important thing in ultras. Once you get to the high level, is even mid-pack runners. You know, people like me, you need to have a bit of faith that you've done everything you can, and that you probably, so long as you don't have any weird problems like twist an ankle, that things are probably going to go okay. You know, you need to be relaxed on that start line.
And with the way that ultras and likes of UTMB have gone in the last few years, you used to have time to ease into these things, even if you were at the front. Whereas now, a lot of these races, it's from the gun and it's hard, and it feels a lot more racy than it used to.
Yeah, people have got quicker. Definitely, like, there's certainly, yeah, in the men's and the women's. You know, obviously the records have gone down a lot since COVID. The records have got a lot quicker in the men's and the women's. And that's people are. There's more people in the sport, so yeah, there's going to be. It's obvious, isn't it? It's like there's more people doing it, so there's probably just as big a percentage not finishing and blowing up, but because there's actually just more good runners doing it professionally, in particular, there's more people doing it full time. Yeah, you're bound to get. These races are bound to become more competitive. I mean, that's what drives the sport forward, isn't it? It's like the volumes of people coming in. That's what drove marathon running, because marathon running was never very big. You know, in the old days, you know, when the Olympics first started, you know, it wasn't until the 1980s that marathon running boomed, and then the standard of marathon running just went through the roof, and then women were allowed to run marathons, whenever from the 80s, and you've seen it in the women's. It's just got better and better, and that's what happens. It's how the sport progresses. It's the more people you have, the more chance there is that one of those people is going to break the record. I don't know. It's kind of obvious, isn't it? But yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, I think there was a tradition, wasn't there? The tradition in the early days of UTMB, it was more of an it was like seen as a very extreme thing. So people went off very cautiously because they didn't know what to. They were a bit scared of the distance almost, Whereas now I think people are training more seriously and training only for 100-mile race, and they've got a lot more confidence that they can run the distance fast. Like, I think maybe in Scott Jurek was maybe one of the first guys who showed you can actually run 100 miles in the mountains, without doing very much walking. I might be wrong about that. Maybe people would, but in certain, so he's the first person that I'm aware of who was actually just running and really pushing the sport forward.
Yeah, it does feel though that I think with the recent wave of fast starts, I almost feel like the watershed moment was Pau Capel's 2019 UTMB. It feels like we started to see that more and more. But that was like that stands out as a highlight of someone going hard from the gun. Certainly at UTMB, but I think we see it now at a lot of other races.
Yeah. To me, that's kind of a risky strategy. I like the people I coach. I'd never say that would never be something. It's never. So I'd always have to have a big talk about that one if someone wanted to go off the front of UTMB and win it that way. I think it just makes sense to sit back for the first quarter and see what happens. Obviously, you need to be fast enough. You don't want to give these guys an hour lead by the time you get to the Les Contamines. I mean, that would be a bit. But yeah, I was running at that kind of level, and being out in front of a race, like I'm pushing beyond what you think is sensible. It's really stressful, and I think in an ultra, you want to limit, you're going to be in what Courtney calls it, in the pain cave, well, that's just extreme fatigue, a lot of stress on the body. You're going to get there, but personally, I think it's a good idea to limit that, for as long as possible. You don't want to be in there from 20K. You want to maybe after halfway, need to start hurting after halfway, right? I mean, if you get to, Courmayeur and you're just like totally stressed out and you're just slowing down already, you're kind of finished. And a lot of guys do that. It's a very risky strategy. So, but I think what was interesting about that, he was obviously ran a lot of races. I think he was probably had every right to do that year because he had the experience to run it that way. I think what's interesting is people with no experience of running that race or running that kind of distance hard, they do it. They just get over-aroused for that race, and they do it without having sort of built up to it in any way. They've not ran a really aggressive 100K, I say to people, you need to have, once you can run 100K really well, really hard, once you've nailed that 100K and you're really confident, you can go out and you can run 100K and just feel great. That's when you're ready to go to 100 miles. I don't like the idea of going to 100 miles unless you've really cracked 100K. Yeah, you can. Obviously, there's some runners have done that. They just go straight in 100 miles and they're great at it.
Well, it's similar to coming up through the distances in the road and track world. You don't jump straight to the marathon. You sort of graduate and carry the learnings, carry the training, and try to hold on to the speed as the distance gets longer, right?
Yeah, I mean, like most of all my coaching experience is with shorter distances up to marathon. I mean, I love coaching the marathon. Yeah, and how I coach ultra runners is how I'd coach someone for marathon, basically. So what I'm kind of almost trying to do is apply what the Canova type system of marathon training to ultra marathon. Yeah, and yeah, he'd probably say, yeah, it's very important for athletes to actually develop the speed and strength, and resilience and the endurance by doing 5K, 10K, half marathon before they step up to marathon. Obviously, there's a few famous guys who have actually not done that. But yeah, you look at someone like Kipchoge, that's the classic. That's how you become a marathon runner. You get the speed, and then you develop, and you go longer. I actually, to be honest, I don't. There's a lot more guys not doing that now. Because of the money's so huge in marathon. A lot of these young Kenyans and young Ethiopians are going straight to marathon. They're not messing around on the track. They're just straight in age 19 to marathons. I don't know if that's the best way.
Yeah, I mean, they're not doing it because it's a proven recipe for being at their absolute best. There may be other reasons for it. We also see it in other sports that they try and get the athletes younger and kind of skip certain leagues or cups and things like that along the way just to get them younger, because they do bring something else to the table there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one with ultra. Something I wanted to ask you about, you wrote a good article on your website about why you don't use Training Peaks, and I'll assume you don't use Final Surge and these other things. A couple of things in this kind of topic. Short answer on what do you use, but I'm also really more interested in what are the metrics, because what are the metrics that matter for you? Because, we know with Training Peaks, we've got the training stress score and all of this stuff. And I've used all of those types of things, and there are benefits to it as well. But I'm keen to know your take on all of this.
Okay, so the first question is, what do I use? Yeah. Basically, the programs, the Training Peaks is two things. There's the program which the coach types in as Training Peaks. So it's a delivery system for a program. And then there's the raw data that the athlete uploads from the Garmin or whatever onto Training Peaks. So I use different systems for those two things. So the programs are handwritten, not with my shitty handwritten, but I write them on a Word document, and I convert it to a PDF so that you can't change it accidentally, delete stuff. I send the athlete PDF. The program's normally 3 months long. I write a 3-month program, send it off to the athlete, email. That's how the actual Word template I use is the template Canova used to write my programs on back in the 90s. That's how he still coaches. He gives people PDFs of the program. It's just all Canova's very mathematical workouts. I use the same thing because it's partly, I don't know, that's all you need. You don't need a complex delivery system for a training program because you're constantly changing it anyways. Program, it's not a static thing. So I don't make it complicated. I don't need to pay a company to actually deliver. I could write your program on a piece of paper. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a lot easier to type it out. It's a lot neater. So the other side of that is there's a real old school piece of software called Attack Point. I mean, you may never have heard of Attack Point. It was developed for orienteering. I don't know how long ago. And I guess the reason I came across it was because Robbie was the first guy I actually coached one-to-one remotely. Because he came to me just before CSNL. I forget what year it was. It was a long time ago, 10 or 12 years ago. And I needed a way to, so yeah, I'd send him programs on the PDF, but I needed a way for him to feed back to me. And he was already using a tap point. He'd already been, because it's a really popular thing back in 10, 12 years ago. I mean, a lot of athletes, a lot of good athletes. Chris Jones, who's a very good mountain runner, he's on a tap point. You'd be surprised. There's lots of good British and Scottish runners, fell runners use it as well. So I use this attack point thing. It's very simple. The metrics is a slightly different thing. The data that the athlete types in the attack point is time, distance, vert, set. Good things. Time, distance, vert. There's a couple of other metrics because I like them to record. So there's a little pull-down menu for shoes, and there's another one for sleep. They record their sleep as well, sleep hours, sleep duration. But the thing I like about Attack Point is there's a box for comments, and that's where they write the story of the day. That's where they write about what they got up to at work. That's where they write about their diet. They write about their run. That's where all the stuff I'm really interested in. And if you've read the Training Peaks article, it's not really about Training Peaks. It's about how I work and the sort of feedback I want athletes to give me. And that's where all that feedback goes into that comments box. If I was a really smart software engineer and had loads of money, maybe I'd develop a bit of software. And maybe this is something for the future that I could do. But I'm not a businessman. I'm a fucking runner. Dirtbag, that's what the Americans call it. I was a dirtbag runner,
Yeah.
Looking at 10. Yeah.
It's glamorized now.
Yeah, so I'd have a nice bit of software where each of those, I think there's about 12 different things I'm interested in. The sleep, the nutrition, the feelings during the run, all those different things I write about in the article. There'd be a little box for each of those. I haven't done that because.
So what are the metrics that matter to you whenever you're reviewing somebody's training?
Sorry?
Whenever let's say, an athlete's training for Sierras and Al, what are the things that you're looking for? Are you looking to see in their training diary and attack point that they were consuming a certain amount of carbs, or they had, 8 hours of sleep, or what type of feedback, or are you looking at any heart rate data or cadence or any of this type of stuff?
No, I mean, like everybody, if I want to look at that data, everybody uploads their data to Strava. So like if I want to see where somebody ran, for example, I go on Strava. The main reason for that, it is quite useful, to especially see the profile, the gradients, that kind of thing. But I'm not interested in heart rate data. Cadence is just that's irrelevant to me. But I'm a big believer in transparency. The thing about the sport is, as you know, and I don't want to go there, but there's loads of people cheating. I'm not meaning ultra running. I mean athletics, running, cycling in general. So I think if athletes are going to be believed, their performances are going to be believed, they should be uploading their training, all of them. It should be part of their requirements as an athlete, as a pro athlete, to be transparent with their training. I think that would solve a hell of a lot of problems and save a lot of suspicion. Because, you saw it as soon as Molly Seidel took all that, made her Strava account private, everybody was starting throwing accusations at her yet again. And I think you don't want any, you can see what Robbie does on Strava. You can see, the workouts. You can see how hard he trains, and therefore why he's so fucking good. It's because he works his arse off every day. But what I don't like is, people just pop up out of nowhere and set records, and it's like, well, how did they do that? We don't know, because they're not transparent about anything.
Well, you could say two of the best in ultra running, Courtney and Jim, are are both Strava dark.
Yeah, I mean, Jim never used to be. He is now. I
Although
don't know.
he goes public after the race. he
Yeah,
changes a lot of
I don't know.
his stuff.
I mean, there's probably people are like probably slightly want to be secretive because they don't want people copying what they're doing. Right? There's probably that. I'm not saying everybody who doesn't use Strava is doing it for like the wrong reasons.
No, I get that.
But what I am saying is, I think if because there is so much cynicism and so much doubt and so much finger pointing goes on in the sport, I think athletes should need to be transparent. See, Robbie doesn't have a problem with this because Robbie's like, yeah, if you think you can do my training, do my training. You know, it's like most people couldn't. You couldn't do Robbie's training. I mean, you could attempt to do it, but that's his training. You'd be crazy to, because he's a pro athlete. He doesn't do much. I mean, he just runs and sleeps and eats. I mean, he does some work, but he's not got family, hasn't he? Dog. It'd be crazy to try to copy Robbie's training or Jim's training. So, I don't know. It's just, I think technology is there, isn't it? I think we should use it. I think that's just, I mean, again, that's something I have an opinion on that. And I don't care that Jim or Courtney or Killian or whoever's not transparent. It's very important to me as a coach, the people I coach, transparent with the training they're doing. And also, I think their sponsors kind of like it. I think if I was the Adidas marketing guy, I'd want my athletes to be transparent with what they're doing because it reflects well on the brand as well, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, well, I suppose Strava is as much a training diary as it is social media at this point. So it is a way that the athletes can put themselves out there just through having their training public, and there's no other extra fancy photos and other influency type work that needs to be done about it. But it's interesting, what you're saying there, because there was the Killian EK and then 10K flat type of workout that everyone was copying for a while, and then the trend of the double thresholds from the Norwegians, and that kind of stuff's happening because we see the training, and then people are going and trying to do it themselves, and it gets popular. It's working for them. Let's try it.
Yeah, I mean that happens. Yeah. But there's people, there's people are. Yeah, that's one thing I don't. One thing I don't like is you see this a lot. People just what you'll see a lot. This is especially on Instagram. People have put these amazing workouts on. I just did 20 by a kilometer in 3 minutes off a minute rest, whatever. Remy Bonnet did one before Ciesanel last year. Yeah, he did the 10K VK. He did a VK in 30 minutes, then a 29-minute 10K. And it's like, yeah, if people I work with did that, I wouldn't like that. I want them just. The thing is, what training's about is being very average consistently for a very long period of time. You saw what happened to Remy after he did that workout before Ciesanel. Yeah, he ran a terrible race. I think he DNF. Yeah, you've just got the secret to being successful and progressing is just being boring. You've just got to be consistent and average in every workout. We'll do it week after week after week, year after year after year. So this idea that you need to do these spectacular workouts and just boast about them, I think what Remy was doing there was trying to psych people out. He's trying to psych out the competition because he knows, Killian will see that workout, Robbie, the Kenyans, they'll all see this workout. So Killian did it before Zagama. He did a 42K mountain run, average of, 2 minutes a kilometre or something. I think it's 4 minutes, wasn't it, or 3:45?
I think the gap was like 3 flat or something. Yeah, it was crazy. It was definitely a psycho. He titled it Race Sim or something.
Yeah, it's just trying to psych people out. And I don't know. I'd rather. You don't even know if that's the workout he did, but it's a very good way. Like that might have got to a few of his competitors there. But I mean, Remy needs to do it. But Killian doesn't need to do. I don't think Killian needs to play those games. I don't know why he's doing that. I mean, I find that all that kind of thing a bit slightly, I don't know, just a bit childish. Like I want to. Yeah, it's social media, isn't it? A lot of people, they got big egos. They want to boast about stuff. I want to see Jim on there talking about failure. I'm just interested in both sides. Like when you having a hard time, I want to see workouts that didn't go to plan. You know, honestly, I tried to do this workout, I just blew. You know, and your picture of you lying on your back. There's a tendency, isn't there, to just only talk about the stuff that went really well, and not the stuff that got you injured, the stuff that put you in a big hole, sort of physically.
Yeah, and that connects perfectly back to the the point you made about learning from the mistakes, learning from the DNFs, learning from the things that don't go well.
Yeah, I think if there was more of that kind of stuff, on social media, then I think this would be a bit healthier, because obviously the burnout rate in ultra running in particular it's outrageous. So many the top runners just come and go very quickly, and that's a problem. And that's that these people are just basically running themselves into the ground. They're causing themselves long-term health problems.
Yeah, it feels like there was a spike in that type of chronic fatigue-inducing ultra training, and then there was a rebalancing, and it feels like we might be either in or coming into a new phase of that.
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly, it appeared to be there was a big, because at the time, and it was really bad. I think that was when, now there's so many people in the sport and so many new people appearing, we don't notice it. That's all. We just don't notice the people who vanish. We'd notice if Jim or Courtney or Killian vanished, but, we wouldn't notice if people who aren't quite so well known just vanish. But I think the attrition rate is still really.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be. It seems to be very rare to have a long, successful career. Even people that have done had good results at UTMB and things like that, and they're still in the sport, and we see them racing. They're maybe racing in top 20 now instead of top 5 at a UTMB, and I think that's something to do with maybe what they had to do to get that result, but also just the amount of people coming into the sport, young people coming into the sport, and just people hammering as well.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on a couple of trends as well.
Sorry?
I want to touch on a couple of trends and get your opinion on.
We sort of got off the Training Peaks thing there. Did I kind of answer that question?
Yeah, no. I think we're good on that.
I mean, because you were asking about the metrics, and I mean the TSS and all those. There's a million metrics, aren't there? Those metrics. It would be great if you could have a number that said if an athlete was ready to do a hard workout. You don't. You can't do that. There's so many factors that influence whether an athlete's actually ready or not. You can't. It's impossible to measure. So the way I determine that, the only way you can determine that right now is through subjective feedback, by actually checking in with the athlete every day, seeing how they're feeling, and then making the decision on the day. The guys will write this training log. I'll read it I'll check the evening, but I'll read them all again in the morning. If there's something going on I don't like the look of, I'll just move the workout. If they've got a big workout, like tempo, an uphill tempo, 40, 50 minutes. Yeah, it's just, if they're still fatigued from the previous workout and whatever, or something's gone on at work, can stress them out. If, I don't know, they've got exams, they might have had an argument with the missus. It happens, I believe. If you're a runner, and all you care about is running, don't, just go to sleep at 8 p.m. every day. Like, there's a million different reasons that can affect whether or not an athlete's ready to do a workout. And that's what I'm looking at with that subjective feedback. And it would be so awesome if there was a fucking number that could tell me that, but there isn't. I know Training Peaks claims there is, but there isn't. They're lying. It's a lie. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. You have to talk to the athletes. You have to know the athlete. That's the only way you can know if they're ready to do a workout. That's very important, because if you do a workout when you're stressed and fatigued, that workout's going to be no use. It's just going to make you more stressed and fatigued. There's only any point doing hard training if you can adapt to the training. There's no point doing hill reps, hill intervals, really long runs, unless you can adapt to the fucking things. There's no point doing that, because otherwise they just fatigue you and you won't actually improve. You'll get worse. That's why the whole communication thing, the feedback mechanism between the coach and the athlete is so important.
Yeah, my limited experience, I've always found that coaching-athlete relationship, for me, it's not about anything. The top of the list is, do you communicate on a level? That's the most important factor. And I've changed coach a couple of times. And when you find somebody that you can communicate well with, and they're not limited by how much time you're using to talk to them, then that's I think that's the most important thing. Find someone that you can relate to and that has open communication channels. So that's interesting.
I mean, one of the things I do before I work with anyone, I normally speak. I speak to them 2 or 3 times, maybe 10 or 12 hours. I think at 10 to 12 hours, I actually start to know whether this person I'm going to get on with, whether this person's suitable, almost, like if we click or not. Because it's about having similar interests and a sort of common understanding, isn't it? Well, the thing I don't like is working with people who I don't get on with. So you have to talk to them a lot before I actually start the coaching even begins. Yeah, and because for me anyway, coaching is all about talking and communication. If you can't communicate with the athlete at the beginning, it's not going to work out very well, is it? The athlete's not going to want to talk to you because they hate your politics, or they hate whatever, I don't know, your principles, or your views on, diet or whatever. There needs to be some common ground. I'm not saying, I've coached people who are real racists, I've coached people who are, but you're not going to like every single little thing about a person. But there has to be enough common ground for you to actually have a semi-decent relationship and enjoy talking to each other. That the most, in terms of the process of coaching, that's the most important thing for me, like talking early on. Also, I talk a lot, so people need to be happy talking for 3 or 4 hours when they talk to me. Doesn't happen every day, obviously. I was taught Friday. Yeah, I have 12 hours talking Friday. My voice is still fucked from that. Yeah, I spoke to 5 people on Friday, 12 hours total.
And is that like a monthly catch-up type of thing, or weekly,
No, it's completely random. So people give me this kind of feedback, lots of feedback, and a lot of the things they talk about I can sort of handle with an email. So I might need to adjust the training a bit, and that might be all I need to do, just adjust the training, a few more easy days, especially if it's an important time of the year when they're doing big runs. This is one of the key things about Canova that really influences what I do with ultra runners. His athletes, when they're in the specific phase of marathon training, they'll do these big fucking workouts. Like, he does this thing called a special block, and they might do 50 kilometers of work on the same day. And the special block's a little bit like the double threshold. So they might do 20 by kilometre in the morning, marathon pace, then in the afternoon, 25k tempo run at marathon pace. So 50, 60 kilometres of work and over 50k of marathon pace running on the same day. Now, the thing about him is he doesn't like then go and give them a Tuesday and a Thursday workout. For him, the number one thing is they go into that workout fresh. So they might have done 3 or 4 easy days going into it. But then afterwards, it's like it might take the guy 3 days to recover. It might take 6 days, but he'll wait and wait and wait until they're ready to go again. That's what coaching has to be. That's why that's why static programs don't work. That's why if you're not communicating every day with athletes, that's why it doesn't work. Because if he gets that guy who's just done a special block back to doing some more reps or some more tempo work too soon, they're not going to adapt to the special block. Jerry Schumacher, who's another coach I got a lot of respect for, he does the same thing. He calls it a medium dig cycle. I don't know if you've heard of a medium dig cycle, but it's very similar to special block. You go hard these athletes go hard for a week. They might do 4 or 5 really hard workouts in 5 days. Then they'll take a couple of weeks off and then boom. It's all to do with supercompensation. So the more the stress you stress the body, the idea is the more adaptation you'll get. It's a very, very high risk sort of strategy for a coach and only use it with the very best athletes who are already really calloused to doing 1 session a day or 2 sessions a week. That's the problem with this fad, with this double threshold thing. People need to remember who's doing that. It's fucking Jacob Ingebrigtsen. You're not Jacob Ingebrigtsen. You're not that guy. You've not been training since you were 10. You're not. Most people can't handle that. So don't do it. Now it works for him and it works for Kenyan athletes, who have been running since they were little kids, but it doesn't. That's not suitable training for novice runners.
So just on that type of super block type of style, what would that look like for an athlete if they were training for an ultra trail?
When
I say an athlete, I'm talking about someone that's capable, someone that's competitive, like an elite runner.
Yeah, I try to avoid those. I generally like to avoid back-to-back long runs. I mean, like how some coaches use it. Yeah, they'll give athletes maybe either back-to-back, so they might do a 6-hour and a 4-hour. That's kind of a kind of standard thing I've seen. What's also quite popular for 100 milers is they'll, go and run 100 miles over 4 days. So do 4, very long mountain runs. I mean, the classic thing is to go and run a lap of UTMB, isn't it? The UTMB course over 4 days and stay in the villages. Well, I try to avoid that wherever possible, even for an elite athlete.
That workout that you mentioned, like 20 times a K, and then I think it was a 25K tempo run, that's not something that you would apply for someone running ultra, even though they're doing this huge chunk of work in one day?
No.
Okay.
That works. That's a marathon session. That's designed purely for an elite level marathon runner who's trying to run 2:05 or whatever. That's the kind of training you need to do at that level in the marathon. Obviously, if you want to run a 4-hour marathon, you don't need to be doing loads of reps. You don't need to do that much work in one day. You just need to run it.
It's a crazy amount of work. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. There is, again, in marathon running now, although the times are really, really quick, there is a very high attrition rate. The top athletes, they're not around for very long. I know Kipchoge is kind of unusual in that he's had a very long career, but his training's not quite that extreme. He doesn't work with, his coach is, I think, slightly more, I don't know what the word is, a bit more cautious than Canova. People go to Canova because they want to win the Olympics, they want to make money, and okay, this is what you need to do. if you're going to work with him these days anyway. And he'll give the women will have the same sessions as the men as well. He doesn't really. So that's why there's so many of these guys are running really great times. They got so many guys running under 210 and under 220 in the women's, because this is the workouts they're doing, and they're prepared to take that risk because maybe winning one big marathon for you or I, maybe it's not life changing, but for them, they pick up 50 grand in a Cat B marathon down in Monaco or somewhere. That's it. They're set up for life, and so's their family.
Yeah.
So it's worth the risk to them to do this, what some might call crazy training, because it's very high risk training, because there's a risk you might not recover, you might get injured, you might get sick, and you're doing it in a specific phase, so you're doing it fairly close to the marathon. That's why the whole going in fresh and recovering properly is so important. If you are using very fatiguing workouts, you can't just have a static program that says you're doing another hard workout 2 days later. You just have to play it by ear, as we say that. It's really important. So, I don't really. There's sometimes, like, the only times I use that with ultra runners is if they're doing long runs back to back, and the only time I'll do that is if logistically it's the only way the only thing they can do. So when I coach a girl called Fiona Pascal, and she did the Lakes 24-hour thing, which I'm sure you know about. She's doing as many peaks as you can in 24 hours in the lakes. And because she lives in Devon, which is 500 kilometres from the Lake District, it made no sense at all for her to drive to the lakes, do a long run, drive back. It's just ridiculous idea. So that was one of the exceptions to the rule. She'd drive up and maybe do three big recce days and then drive back. But because sometimes it's a logistical nightmare, and it's the same with UTMB. If you've only got a few days to actually go and look at if you want to recce it, that is, you do it over a few days, then you go back home. But I much prefer having consistent average training in ultra running. So you're just doing 4 to 6 hour runs fairly regularly, lots of recovery. I don't like having big blocks because, it's just so fatiguing physically and metabolically. I've done it myself. Everything I give to athletes to coach, I've done myself. There's nothing they do that I've never done. I experiment on myself, and I hate back-to-back long runs. The second run is just so horrible, and there's no advantage to that. It's not making you tougher psychologically. It's not improving your physiology in any way. It's just high risk. Back-to-back sessions are just high risk for no reason. If you want to, you know what I mean?
What I would like to maybe say on that is my coach was against the too long back-to-backs, but I wanted to do it for UT-LAC because I wanted to see as much of the course as I wanted to see. It's a 7 o'clock night start, and I wanted to see the part that was basically in the dark, because I find that I can waste a lot of mental energy thinking about things, and I just felt that I can go here. It's an hour's drive away, so I think I did a 6.5 and a 5 for 2 days with all the nutrition goals and equipment and all that type of shit. And I just feel like going into the race, I know what's ahead of me in the first 50k of dark, and it'll just kind of quieten the mind and let me just get on with it. So it was more mental training rather than physical training for me, because I know it meant that I did one less session that week.
Yeah, and that's a circumstance where I'd probably use it. Yeah, because the athlete wants to do it and they feel like they're going to benefit from doing it. Because it's a two-way thing. I'm not like, I don't just say absolutely no way to every single idea an athlete has. Like as I said earlier, the main thing is that the athlete goes into the race confident. So if actually going out there and doing 2 days, back to back, is actually going to boost the athlete's confidence, I'll say great. But what I've found when I do that with athletes, and obviously I've changed the way I work with athletes a lot since I first coached ultra runners, over 10 or 12 years ago to now. Yeah, back then I used those because that's what every coach seemed to be doing. Everybody was doing massive back-to-backs. And I had one of my friends, Vagin Armstrong, he's a really good ultra runner from New Zealand. He was doing back-to-back-to-back-to-backs. He was doing 4 days, really big. I remember trying to do one of those with him years ago. I think I was living in Austria at that time. And after 3 days, I said, that's it. I was just finished. I couldn't do another day. Just absolute no. So I've changed that a lot. But most athletes tend to not want to do that. But I say there are these exceptional circumstances. I think one of the guys doing UTMB this year is going to do 2 days on the course back to back. And it's actually seeing the middle bit, the bit they're going to be running at night as well.
Yeah. I came away not having ran in this region before, and people had said to me, even people around town in Chamonix had said, oh yeah, it's really technical over there, it's very steep, really technical. And I came away from those 2 days running thinking, yeah, it's not as technical as the trails around Chamonix, and it's not steeper per kilometre than the stuff I run on every day. So it totally is a confidence booster for me going into it. So it's interesting that, but that's a good insight from you.
Confidence is really important. Like not everybody wants to recce. Some people do, and I've got to. You kind of got to work with that as well. I mean, also a lot of the people I coach, they're not starting from scratch. So they come in with their own ideas and their own way of working. So I've started coaching a lady called Elsie Davis recently, and she's been running a long time. And I've got to adapt what I do to what she wants to do because she's already got a lot of ideas and she knows what works for her. She knows what doesn't. So I'm having to adapt to that. That's certainly when you're coaching what you might call athletes come to you already elite. You basically sometimes you just have to completely change your whole philosophy on stuff and actually do what they want. Because that's the only logical starting point, with somebody like her at that level, because if an athlete doesn't like doing really long runs and they've been doing that for like 20 years and then they come to you and you say, no, you've got to go and run 8 hours. That's my system. That's just dumb, isn't it? You've kind of got to, it's a learning thing, like I learn as much from, as a coach, you're learning from athletes as much as they're learning from you sometimes, It's funny, the more experience... So
the likes of Elsie, are you then coaching her using what's worked for her plus what you're bringing to the table and combining the two? Because obviously it's some of the improvements are by filling in the blanks and maybe things that she wasn't doing before or doing things in a different way, like the new stresses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of both. Definitely, you have to listen to the athlete and you have to listen to what has worked for them in the past. But also, what you look for really with any athlete is you look for what they're doing right and you look for what they're doing wrong or not doing. And what I really love is when an athlete comes to me and they're doing loads of shit wrong, because then I know, right, that's the best day ever. Somebody's like, I can change this person's life, Sometimes it's really tricky. Some athletes, it's like, you're doing everything perfectly and you're still having shit results. This is going to be a bit tricky, But that's really the case.
You have to figure out why.
Yeah, it's great. It's just that's what's great about coaching. Every athlete's a puzzle, I've never coached 2 people that are the same. Maybe if I coached identical twins, I'd love to do that. And if there's any identical twins listening, get in touch. Because there are a few, aren't there, in running? There's the Harner twins. there's those girls, aren't they, who do ultras, or like sub-ultras anyway. Forget their name. Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be quite a really cool experiment, actually. I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by biology.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so unpredictable. Everything's unpredictable, you see. That's just the nature of biology. It's everything's chaos. Like twins.
Well, it's like trying to tune a car, but you're not allowed to. You can't look under the bonnet.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, just looking at the time. So, just looking at the time, we've been going an hour and 45 minutes from now. So, we're at least covering people off on their medium long runs at this point. But there's a couple other things I want to get your insight on. Well, I'll maybe summarize it as trends around nutrition. Okay. So we've seen in ultra a full range of nutritional choices, and it seems to be that the top athletes now are kind of aligning with between trail and road. Everyone with success is going high carb. We're talking 100, 120 grams plus. But we do have these other things that they almost feel like, I don't know if they're coming from across the pond or where they're coming from, but we have these like OFM, fat-based diets, strategic carb use, ketones. I kind of want to get your insight on your thoughts around nutrition and these other things that keep popping in and out, like ketones.
Yeah, I mean,
so start off with high carb.
Yeah, it's a logical starting point. Again, I think the thing that the thing that annoys me a bit about so certainly ultra running, trail running, which you don't get. See, I come from a road running coaching track background. You don't get this polarization, these factions develop in road running. It's a very much, when you talk about a community, the road running community, so they're not arguing about diets and all these, the minutiae of the sports with each other. They're just racing each other, But ultra running, because it's so new and because nobody's written a decent book about it and because we don't really understand the physiology of it or any aspects of how to train for it, it's very prone to these extremes. So we on the one side, we do have this extreme, these people who don't eat carbohydrate. I don't even know if I want to talk about that. But then on the other side, we have people who are doing the high carb. I mean, firstly, high carb this idea of high carb being a recent thing is bullshit. Okay, I mean, I remember, I was coaching and training with a few very good triathletes back in the day. So back when I was at that, there's a guy called Simon Lessing there, who's like a world champion triathlete. He's a South African English guy, one of the best in the world. And they were going high carb, what you call high carb now. They get 100, 120 grams. They weren't really precise about it. But that's what we were looking at. And certainly the distance athletes I worked with at the time, and this is nearly 25 years ago. We were saying 100 grams is something that's optimal. And the reason is there was actually plenty of research around back then to justify that. There's I worked in, I did my sports science and MSc at Bath University. I also worked in research a little bit, so I'm very much back then I was very much into the science side of stuff. And there was a seminal paper written about an ultra runner called Yanis Kouros, who people should know about, I guess. And they were looking at his nutrition during a 6-day race. And the first day of that 6-day race, this is in 1988, I think this study was done. He was out. Kouros used to go hard and then get slower and slower. So I think the first day he ran something like 270 kilometers, something crazy. I don't remember. But what was interesting, he'd analysed his diet. He was eating like his own products. He made his, back then they didn't have gels and all that. It was very much. So he's eating 99% carbohydrate. And it worked out at 140 grams per hour. And he wasn't hanging around, He was eating this on a hot day. So yeah, and that was a very influential paper at the time, and that wasn't something a lot of people were studying though back then. There wasn't a lot of research going on because there wasn't the nutrition industry, the supplement industry didn't really exist then. So a lot of the research we see now is a result of the growth of this $1 trillion line called the supplement industry. So yeah, there was, but the idea that cyclists and runners, triathletes weren't doing high carb during racing back then that's just not true. This was basically, I think, where this has come from. It's come from cycling. This idea that high carb is the reason they're all riding quicker times than Lance Armstrong. They're saying, oh yeah, we're because we know they're just as fast as they were in the dark days of EPO, and so they've just used this as a reason. It's like, oh yeah, no, we're not taking drugs. It's because we're doing 120 grams of carbs per hour. If only that was true. But Armstrong was doing 120 grams of carbs per hour as well. They all were. Like cyclists just eating all the time. I've raced bikes. I raced bikes at university. I had a few running injuries, which I won't really go into those. Yeah, I've raced bikes. I'm obsessed with cycling. I'm as obsessed with cycling as I am with running because it's an endurance sport, very similar to cycling in many ways. I love cycling. But yeah, it's not a new thing, this high carb. I mean, the interesting thing for me is that some athletes, a lot of it's related to intensity. So obviously there was some research done here by some Spanish guys during a mountain marathon. And that's the study which have got a lot of athletes and coaches saying, yeah, you've got to do 120 because the guys who were taking 120 grams per hour in that mountain marathon performed the best. But that's a mountain marathon where the intensity is a lot higher. They're running the climbs, hammering the descents. So the question is that appropriate for ultra running? I've coached ultra runners who can do 140. There's a guy who did 24 hours on the track, guy Peter, a few years ago, and yeah, he could do 140. And there's another guy I coached, Josh, he can do 140, no problems. So they were both fairly big guys. But equally, yeah, I've coached people who have won really big races on what's turned out to be 60 grams an hour. We thought it was a lot more than that.
What do you mean turned out?
Well, this is a good segue to Spring Energy. Yeah,
so that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so this is the interesting thing for me about this whole this story at the moment. Okay, so some people, I understand people feel quite let down, but yeah, a few of the guys I coach, I've always recommended that because a lot of people I've coached are vegan. Veganism is kind of very popular in ultra running, and they're into natural foods, macrobiotic type diets, and just very natural sort of whole foods. So, and that's the obvious choice because it was one of the few gels that is 100% natural.
And they taste good. They do taste very good.
They taste very, very nice. They did. And, I use them. They're okay, in terms of, I'm not an elite athlete though, so I always feel shit after 5 or 6 hours because my feet get really hurt because of all my injury issues. But yeah, I've coached a few of the guys. They say, yeah, we've used them, because I encourage people to experiment with lots of different products because, yes, certainly long ultras, you've really got to experiment to find what works. It's not like you can't say, yeah, it's not like you've got to use mountain. That's definitely going to work. Some people love mountain, some just can't stomach it. Everybody's kind of a bit different. Yeah, a couple of the guys were like, yeah, we've done the awesome sauces, and they were the ones with the high carb before. Yeah, just getting hungry. Yeah, I've had that. Like, I'm not bullshitting. A lot of people said you just get too hungry on those, and they change. They go to SIS, to the beta fuel or something. But also, a couple of the ladies coached. This is not everybody in the UK. I coach mainly British people. They're really expensive in Britain, so it's an expensive choice. But yeah, a couple of the girls were like, yeah, these are great, and they love them, and and they've won very big races on those gels. I'd assumed, they were taking whatever, 100, 120 grams per hour, and of course they weren't. They were taking whatever, 60 or 70, but they didn't bonk. They won the races, and one of these girls won Western States. I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So I'm not. So that's what's interesting for me is like this idea that you have to aim for 120 or 100 grams is obviously not true. That's maybe true at high intensities in shorter races. So maybe OCC, UTMB, you need very high carb intake because of the intensity, because you're using glycogen preferentially for most of the climbing. But UTMB, you can get away with much lower carb intake because you're not really hitting your glycogen store. So all you're trying to do is keep your blood sugar topped up. Yeah, it's bad it's happened, but it's good in terms of, it's interesting.
So let me ask you.
It's like I say, everything's an experiment, isn't it? And this is one of those unintended experiments, which has had obviously a lot of. It's answered quite a few questions, to be honest, because I know, we know that Courtney Darwater doesn't eat much, doesn't take in loads of carbs. It's 200 cal. That's what I've heard. I know there's various figures thrown around, but she's not taking huge amounts of carbs. She's using mainly tailwind. So she's getting maybe 50 grams an hour on average. Yeah, and I think maybe if you're female and you're actually very, very deficient at these slower paces, you don't need, really high carb intake. And if you
I was going to say there, because do you think that like the guys are maybe more known for hammering, whereas the women are kind of have more of a reputation for smart racing? Maybe that's why they can get away with a little less on the calories because they're just not burning as hot.
Yeah, I wrote a sort of Instagram thingy on this a while ago. Yeah, and there's a whole host of reasons why women are actually have a much lower DNF rate than men. Because it was that Western States where there were three women were in the top 10, and I think Courtney was finishing in the top 10, and the women were just making the men look a bit.
Yeah.
And there's a number of reasons for that, And one of the reasons is, they're actually sensible. They don't go off like a steam train. They're much better at pacing. I mean, there's lots of other reasons. I think they have better coping mechanisms. They can actually handle fatigue. They can reframe fatigue, in a race so much better than a guy can. They're for whatever reason, that's probably upbringing. It's probably a nurture type thing. They have to. They have to be more positive because they have to deal with shit their whole lives, don't they? I mean, but certainly, that's a reason. That could be a reason why, because they're actually not just hitting they're not running out of Chamonix 6 minutes a mile using up precious glycogen, because you have to be a miser, don't you, in an ultra? You've got to take in as much as you can stomach and use as little energy as you can. That's how you finish the things, and perform well. Yeah, and women's just, I've never coached anyone so far, a lady so far, who just doesn't know how to pace a race almost instinctively, whereas some of the guys are just, especially if it's a race that starts uphill, they just smash that first climb, and just
the amazing male ego
than they've done in training.
I think ego is one of the worst things in running, and it just sets you up for failure more than anything else. Like, even one thing I noticed whenever I moved from kind of the suburbs to the city is that I had to run around lots of other people, on canal paths and things like that. And if you're out there and you're trying to train properly and you're trying to make sure your easy's easy and you've set a heart rate limit or whatever, and people are, huffing and puffing and running past you, whatever, you need to swallow your pride. You need to get your ego in check. And I'm not sure if that's a guy thing or more prevalent as a guy thing. It seems to be.
Women have egos, but they're not like men. Everybody has an ego, but men's egos are a huge problem in coaching because, this is like, I can only speak from my experience of coaching both sexes, but women tend to be a lot more disciplined and open to actually what I say, so they're more likely to actually follow my advice without questioning it. Whereas men, there's always a little bit of a battle to get them trying to get them doing stuff my way. And that, I've never come even with women who are very obsessive and very type 1, perfectionist types, they're always very sort of open-minded to new ideas. And I don't think that's because I'm a guy, I'm an old guy or whatever. I think it's because that's just what they're like. They don't have this ego, doesn't get in their way. They're happy to be. They understand that, or maybe they're just better at putting the ego to one side. They understand if they're going to have work with the coach, they're paying me to make them faster. Therefore, they understand they have to put their ego to one side to do that. Because there's no point paying me money, me telling you what to do, then you ignoring it. That makes you a total dope, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But there's so many guys I've coached who are like that. It's like I give them this advice and they don't take it. And I'm still getting the money. Like, I don't charge very much money, but why would you pay someone? And imagine, your banker, you're saying, where should I invest my money? And he says, invest it in these stocks. He's the expert. You know nothing about stocks. And then you invest them in a whole load of different stocks and you lose all your money. It's like they come to me because I'm the expert and they want to learn, but then this ego gets in the way with the guys and stops them learning. It's like this, it's really weird. I don't get it because the thing is, the thing about coaching is to be a good coach. The only way you can be a good coach is to learn from other coaches. Coaching it's like being a good doctor, teacher. The actual coach development comes from mentorship. Obviously, it comes with working with athletes as well, but you can't just be a coach if you haven't been coached. You can't just make it up. You need to. So that's why that's why I'm fairly, I'm sometimes fairly dubious of athletes who've never been coached and just start a coaching business because they've had a couple of good results. I always find that kind of strange because how can you coach if you've never been coached? I mean, you don't know what coaching is, and that's so the whole point of coaching is you listen to the coach and do what they say. I mean, maybe it's just really obvious to me because I've had maybe 6 or 7 really great coaches, and I don't know, mate. I always did what I was told. Like some of the stuff Canova would tell you to do was crazy, but I'd do it anyway. And the same with my coach when I was young. Yeah, I was doing some really hard training when I was in my sort of late teens, mid-teens. So I do it anyway because he's the boss. He knows what works. I may not think it's a great idea, and he's always happy to explain why I'm doing it. But I do it because he's an expert and he's coached these great athletes. My coach coached some really good runners. The same with Lydiard. Lydiard's very known for coaching some Olympic champions. And so why would you go to Lydiard, work with him, and then just argue with him, not do what he told you? I mean, it's just a bizarre thing, The same with Canova. Canova's quite interesting because if you don't do what he tells you, he just like fuck off. I mean, I don't know if many people know this, but Mo Farah worked with Canova for a while. I've got Mo Farah's training programs that he did with Canova gave him, because Canova's very generous with his work. But he's very transparent. Yeah, and Farah they didn't get on. Farah was like, I'm not doing this. This is crazy. Just fair enough, I mean, but don't just, if you not prepared to learn from your coach, you should probably quit. Don't just keep paying them and then they keep ignoring. Of course, Farah went to Alberto Salazar and they got on famously. But yeah, before Salazar, he was with Canova. Yeah, they didn't get on quite so famously there. That's another thing, like, I don't get on with every athlete. Sometimes I'll start coaching someone and it actually, or doesn't. That's just one of those things. I've worked with some really great people, but sometimes it just doesn't happen, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
I always know when it's time to move on with athletes, but sometimes it is weird when you coach someone and they just sort of fight you. They're fighting you. Yeah.
So I want to wrap things up, but I've got two things I want to ask you about. One on the nutrition side. There's a rise in sodium sweat rate analysis, and it seems to be the latest hot topic. Certainly, I don't know if it's been going around much in road running, but it's certainly a thing in ultra now. So, I know my sodium sweat rate and all this type of stuff. So what's your opinion on this?
Marketing, unnecessary. Just, again, it's just they're selling a product. It's completely... Oh, this... I mean, I've never asked an athlete I've coached, and I've worked with good athletes, like, never asked a single athlete I coached to get any sort of physiological testing. VO2max, lactate threshold, energy expenditure, DEXA scans, wet testing. Absolutely not. All of that stuff is just completely unnecessary. I mean, I remember when this started a couple of years ago, because there's a company called Precision Hydration. I think they're an English outfit, actually.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Yeah, they were claiming on their website that your sweat rate and the constituents of your sweat, the electrolytes within your sweat, are genetically determined. And therefore, if they did this really expensive analysis on your sweat, there's always money involved. If ever money's changing hands for you to do some sort of testing, and if there's a product at the end of it, you should always be a little bit skeptical. And in this case, yeah, they were claiming your sweat rate was genetically determined, and you had that same sweat rate your whole life. Therefore, they could test your sweat and tell you, yeah, when you sweat whatever, 200 milligrams of sodium, 50 milligrams of potassium, 10 milligrams of calcium, and 150 milligrams of potassium, a little bit of magnesium, whatever. And every time you sweat, your sweat's going to contain those electrolytes. Therefore, we can make you this very expensive product that's going to mean that you'll always be in electrolyte balance. It's complete bullshit. Like, the actual truth is, it's not. I called them out because I actually know one of the guys, a guy called Andy Blow, who works with Precision Hydration. He's their head scientist. I called him out on this because I know him, because he was at Bath University at the time I was there. I said, this is bullshit. You can't say that. It's not genetically determined. That's really wrong. I hate these companies that tell lies like this. I'm not afraid to call these people out, because they're basically lying to people to make money. And I'm quite defensive of the integrity of my sport. And by my sport, I don't mean that in a sort of thing I own. It's just sport in general. That should be the one place where it's free from politics, it's free from bullshit, it's free from marketing. It should be a thing that should be, ethical and pure, because everything else in the world's corrupted, So I think sport, we need to keep it real, Let
me ask, do you think it's the genetic claim that's false, or the usefulness of the sweat rate? Like, one of the things that I'd heard was that, this whole sweat loss is pointless in short distance, but over long distance, ultra distance, the balance can then lead to like stomach issues. The imbalance,
okay,
I should say, of
I
salts.
kind of, I was getting to that. Anyway, I said that, and they actually took that off their website. Hats off to them. I called them out, and they took it off. It's no longer on there. And they'll probably say now, yeah, we never said that. But the thing is, like, every time you go out there and do a long run, your sweat rate and what's in your sweat is going to be different, because how much you sweat depends on, quite a huge number of factors. It's not just about the heat and humidity, which is always going to be different. Unless you're running in like the Sahara Desert, where it's always very, very predictable. Most ultras we do, you can't predict heat and humidity. I mean, UTMB in particular, it can be baking hot, it can be snowing. And then, of course, if it's snowing, that doesn't mean to say that you're not going to sweat loads, because you'd be wearing a Gore-Tex jacket, which, despite the claims, doesn't let your sweat out. So you're going to sweat even more in this fucking load of plastic you've got your body covered with. And
wouldn't the sodium rate be the same? Just the quantity of sweat would be higher?
No, but the quantity is always different. And the actual sodium, the amount of sodium you sweat, it depends on your diet, basically. So if your diet's always the same every single day, if you eat the same thing every single day, the same time of day, and...
You'd be very boring.
I mean, I'm a bit like that. I'm a bit OCD about diet, I know Robbie is as well. He can only talk to me for 2 hours because he has to eat every 2 hours. I don't know how he sleeps, to be honest. Probably has IV. I shouldn't say that. A feeding tube. We've got porridge. Sorry. But it's always, that varies, Sodium's not the only important one. There's all these other, there's 3 or 4 other electrolytes that are very important. But no, it varies, so you can't. So if you test your sweat on one day, that might work great in the lab, and you might test your sweat the next 2 weeks later in the lab, having eaten the same diet. It might be the same, but you're getting this test maybe in the lab in June. You're racing in August. You might have completely different values if you test your sweat at the beginning of the UTMB. And then I think, maybe from what I've read, when they've tested, there's actual scientists rather than tame scientists working for a nutrition company have actually done proper testing on this. The constituents of your sweat actually change throughout the course of a 24-hour period. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. Because your body can handle quite a big amount of dehydration. I'm not saying you should purposely get dehydrated, but you can probably a guy like you could probably lose 5 kilos in body weight through sweat loss and not experience any significant decline in performance. You can lose a lot of weight. I'm not saying you should purposely do that, but you can. You can actually lose a lot of water. Your body is mostly water, and you can lose a lot of that without it affecting performance. And your body's also very good at maintaining homeostasis, so it's almost impossible for your to throw your sodium levels completely out of balance by sweating too much. The biggest danger, as you probably know, in ultramarathons, the thing that really that can kill you, send your plasma sodium, through the floor, is drinking too much water. If you don't have enough sodium, your blood sodium will stay the same for a very long time. So you don't need to be that precise with your intake. So, I mean, do you get that?
Yeah, I understand it. It's more, I think the interesting thing is over a period of 12, 20, 25 hours, how that small imbalance can then, in theory, lead to a deficit in performance.
There's no evidence that happens. That said, I mean, there's no evidence for that, firstly. But that said, everybody I work with, as part of their training and part of their race strategy, they take a separate electrolyte. So they'll take salt sticks or S caps. They're the two most popular, I guess.
Yeah. It's a lot cheaper as well.
Yeah, but there's no. So basically, my jet that all as far as you need to take it is if it's a really hot day and you're drinking a litre an hour, take 2. And if it's a normal day and you're drinking just 1 flask an hour, take 1. That's it. That's all. That's the only strategy you need. And that's basically the reason I ask people to take the pills is because there's a little bit of evidence to suggest it's not to do with electrolytes in the muscles. That will always remain stable. Your body's not going to let those fluctuate. You'll basically start feeling fatigue, and your brain will stop you running. If your potassium goes really low, or your calcium goes really low, that's when you start feeling a lot of fatigue. Because obviously, if those electrolytes, you manage to sweat out all that, your heart's going to stop. So your body's very good at maintaining bodily function, and sometimes to do that, it has to stop you running. The main reason I ask people to take the S caps is because a little bit of research that suggests that it helps with stomach issues, so it helps with absorption of carbohydrate. The research is very sketchy, but in my experience, and my experience is more important than any research, coaching has always been 10 years ahead of the science. In my experience, it works. I don't quite know why it works. Number one, it's not going to do any harm taking a salt cap when you're running. It's not dangerous in any way. You're not going to get salt poisoning. It's not like taking loads of ibuprofen, which can, build up in your kidneys, and cause kidney failure. Yeah, so it's better to take it, even though it might not be necessary. It's better to take it just in case. And I think that's when S caps was the first product that was actually developed, and it was developed, I think, for Western states, because obviously it's notoriously hot. And yeah, there was no science there backing up why they took it. They're just the guys who were running it found if they took a salt supplement during the race, it made things go better. But the idea that you need to pay some guys to test your sweat and give you a very precise amount is unnecessary. That's all I'm saying. That's why this idea of sweat testing is just an industry. It's an unnecessary thing. You don't need to know what it is. All you need to do is just take it. It doesn't matter if it's 450 milligrams or 500 milligrams. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know that. That's too much information. Okay, so sports scientists won't measure things because it's useful. Sports scientists tend to measure stuff they can measure. Okay.
Well, to draw a line under sodium, I'll just let you know that my sodium sweat rate is 1,368 milligrams per litre. So
that's great. I mean, the question for you, I suppose, the question I should ask you is because you've been running, quite a long time. So, I guess when you first started, you weren't taking sodium in that quantity, and now you are. So has that changed your performance in any way?
I've only been doing it 1 year.
Okay.
And I came about it from the position that I was getting a bloated feeling after about 7-8 hours. So, but that might start off as gas at 5-6 hours in the race. So it was putting me off using the running belts for something that was maybe 50k or below, because you were swelling a little bit and just it slows you down. It's a distraction. The body's dealing with something else. And from increasing the amount of salts that I take, it seems to have made that disappear. So I can, when I say 7-8 hours, I'm talking about hitting 90 grams an hour for 7-8 hours. I'm talking about consuming gels. So after adding in sodium to the the diet. I was able to take gels. I was able to take gels for the duration of the Swiss Alps 100, which was 33 hours. But of course, there was gel fatigue, but there wasn't stomach slosh, stomach bloat.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it worked for me.
I agree totally that that's exactly why I advise athletes to take separate electrolytes. Because I think a lot of athletes think there's enough electrolytes in the gel and in the energy drink, but there isn't.
Yeah, that was originally my thinking. I used to live in New York. What people don't think about New York is it's extremely hot. April to October, the weather is amazing. It's humid as well, but you're talking June, July, August, it's high 30s. It's 30 degrees Celsius at midnight in late June. And this was back probably when I started taking awesome sauce. No connection, but I wasn't supplementing with any electrolytes, never even thought about it. And I was doing 2 awesome sauce an hour, which was 90 grams, next to no sodium in that. And I've never been a cramper, ever, never suffered cramps. There's certain things, yourself as a runner, I don't really get blisters, don't really cramp, things like that. I started cramping anytime I raced in America. And the thing that solved it was I dropped 1 awesome sauce. So I took 1 awesome sauce and a goo. I was probably getting some sodium from the goo that I wasn't getting from the awesome sauce. And the cramping stopped. But I wasn't racing long ultras in America. I never ran longer than 11, 12 hours in New York.
Yeah.
So that was my experiment of 1.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's if it works for you, do it. Like if someone I coach says, I want to go and get a sweat test, I'm going to say, well, you're wasting your money, but fill your boots. I'm interested in what they say. But I've always recommended people take this. So you don't need to be that precise. That's all I'm saying. I think you need to take it. Don't quite know why. Seems to work. There may be a placebo effect. That you just can't ignore the placebo effect. It is so powerful. But totally. It may actually improve gut function. It may improve the way you actually get absorption of water and carbohydrate in the small intestine. Maybe it works. The thing is, we're not talking about cancer research here. There's not billions going into sports science. Sports science research is a joke. So just because the science doesn't say you need to take salt doesn't mean to say you don't need to take salt. It's just they've got no evidence yet that it really works. But it makes sense because, so if you understand basic physiology, you need these things work in osmosis, and sodium is a big part of that, because there's a gradient. They have to get through into the blood, and it relies on osmosis. So sodium's integral in that. So maybe, but they haven't really proved cause and effect. No, that seems to work.
Okay, well, that's we'll draw a line under sodium. I've got one closing question for you before we end things, and we are currently on the longest ever show on this channel, approaching 2.5 hours.
Yeah, so, you can edit some of the crap out there where I'm just rambling on about.
What people don't know is we spoke to for about 50 minutes before the recording as well. So this is now starting to impact on today's run, but at least my run is going to be perfectly dialed with the start time of the race on Friday, which is one
you're
positive.
Racing Friday, Aaron, you shouldn't be doing. You're not doing a long run today anyway. You're just doing an hour at most.
80 minutes easy, and then I think 30 minutes the next 2 days, and that's it.
Go on, just question.
I just wanted to know from you if you have any running goals or adventures that you want to you have in your head? You know, like
Bucket list.
someone might, yeah, bucket list stuff like a TMB or anything like that.
TMB.
You know, the like the Tour de Mont Blanc. You know, that not.
Okay.
Yeah,
I do, but it kind of varies. Like I have applied for UTMB the last 4 years. I haven't got in. I mean, most of what I do now is kind of research for the people I coach. You know, that's my running. My running is. I know that makes me. I'm not trying to make myself sound like a saint, but the reason I want to run UTMB is not because I've ran the loop a couple of times years ago. I've done it. I don't particularly like racing surrounded by millions of people. You know, I loved Western States because it was a real wilderness experience. It was just the most fantastic thing I've ever done. And part of me doesn't want to do another 100 because whatever I do will never be that good. You know, it's going to be a letdown. But part of me, I want to do UTMB because most of the people I coach just really want to do well in that race. And as a coach, you learn so much by doing a race that your athlete's training for. You just learn a load of stuff. I don't know what I'd learned, but I learned so much running Western States. I just learned, I understand this shit now. And I understood trail running a lot better after that. You know,
it's a different sport.
Yeah, it's a different thing. I was actually at Western States in 2010 with a guy called Ricky Gates. He was actually filming they made a movie called Unbreakable that year. I was there then, but I was pacing a runner from Forest Hill to the finish. But I just thought the whole thing was just ultra running wasn't a big thing in Europe in 2010. UTMB had only just starting to get popular. I thought, what is this? This is all crazy. Who are all these guys wearing with these belt buckles? You know, so I found it all a bit. It's kind of like a real bit of culture shock, you know. But yeah, actually going there though and racing it, I think a lot of people see UTMB and all they see is commercialism, selling shit, making money. But it's not about that. It's not that. That stuff goes on, but it's not about that. And that's why I want to do it. I want to find out what it's really about. Because in 2010, I formed this sort of view of what Western States was, and when I actually ran it, it wasn't. I kind of got it. And, you know, I understood. Yeah, it was like I'm not going to go into that now. That's a whole nother half hour of me waffling on. But no, most of my goals are kind of surrounding, like exploring new races. I'm running in different climates, different bits of the world. You know, I mean, I've raced in about 80 countries in my career. I've raced in all the places I want to race. I've never raced in Saudi Arabia. Never want to. Never. Yeah, just all the places. I'm not ticking off the countries. Just I don't want to. You know, I've been to Afghanistan. I don't want to go back. I definitely don't want to race there. Don't want to race in Iraq. Don't want to race in Syria.
Are there bucket list actual races or distances you'd like to try?
No, the bucket list races were Comrades and Western States. There were a few of the races, you know, when I was a pro runner, I tend to do the same races because they're the races with the money. You just go for the money. It's really mercenary. It wasn't about anything else. I'm not going to lie. My mountain running, it was all about the money. That's why I did it. I did it for money. I didn't do it because I had some spiritual epiphany in the mountains. It's money. The money was amazing back then, you know. And in terms of prize money, it was incredible. So
many athletes would say that now.
No, but now it's like, you know, they're getting huge salaries from these companies, you know. Like TORQs are paying those guys loads of money. They're getting big race bonuses, you know. I remember like Josh Kerr was moaning, wasn't he? He won the world champs, I think indoors, and he got 40 grand. He's moaning, oh, it's only 40 grand, I'm world champion. He probably got $500,000 from his sponsors. Shut the fuck up, you know. It's like, now it's completely different. The prize money isn't the thing, but the thing is the endorsements, you know. Athletes are getting £1,000 off Oakley, £1,000 off Red Bull, you know, and they're getting 10 grand off their sponsor for winning podium in at UTMB or one of these races. The money's pouring in. Jim's getting paid 50 grand to wear a fucking watch, you know. Yeah, it's different. Robbie, you know, Robbie's doing a lot better than I ever did in the sport, and he's not getting it through prize money. He's getting it through bonuses from Adidas. No, you know, I'm not going to say. I don't really want to. It's very unequal, obviously. It's very uneven. You know, like there's guys in TORQ getting 250 grand and guys getting 10 grand, and they're at the similar level. It's, you know, a lot of guys have agents doing the negotiating for them and that kind of thing. It's all very uneven. But yeah, the money's a lot better in the sport now than it was in my day. But yeah, I thought I was a millionaire, you know, because you know
you were a 90s dirtbag.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason was as well, we did that because we saved the money. Like you're living in. I'm not renting an apartment in Teen or Chamonix or somewhere. We're just moving around. You know, the only time we go in a hotel is when the race gives us a hotel. I remember at the end of one season, me and Billy, we just used one of these little. We didn't have race vests, so we had bum bags. I was telling somebody this the other day. Like at the end of the season, we were off for runs. I had 30,000 euros in the bum bag because I couldn't leave it in the tent. I had nowhere to put it. It's like 30 grand in euros and francs. It was a mixture of euros and francs, just in the bum bag with the passport. It was so nerve-wracking, you know, because I didn't have a Swiss account or a French account, so I had to keep it. And then when I got back to the UK, I put it in my, you know, Barclays, you know, when I got home. But we were just travelling around, and I didn't want to post the money back. You know, what could you? Yeah, Jungfrau, they give you 10,000 in 1,000 franc notes. They have a 1,000 franc note in Switzerland, and I remember Jungfrau, they pay you in thousands. It's like fucking hell. This is like 600 quid. You know, so I always used to do the same races for this reason, and since I stopped being serious about it, yeah, I've done a lot of the races I always fancied doing, but never got around to doing. So I've been sort of retired for the last 10 or 12 years, you know. So there's a race called the Swiss Alpine Marathon. That's a race I did. That's one of the first ever ultras in the Alps. I did that race. There's a race called Pico Valletta, Subida Pico Valletta in Spain. It's the highest road race in Europe. It starts in Granada, goes up to 3,500 meters in Sierra Nevada. It's just awesome. Never got to do that race, you know, because there wasn't much money in it. I always wanted to do Comrade. So I've been ticking off these. They're not famous races that maybe people haven't heard of, but I've done a lot more racing in Spain since I retired. I'm going to do Canfranc is a really notorious race. I was there last year, but I was injured, and so I'm kind of doing these races, but there's nothing overwhelming. There's countries I want to visit, and generally the only way I'll justify going to a country is by doing a race, you know. So I went to Thailand recently. During COVID, I went to Thailand to do a race, just because I'd never raced in Thailand, and it was just a good reason. I just love traveling. One day I'd like to go to China. It's expensive. There's a race in Hong Kong I was looking at doing this year, which I'm not doing.
What race was that?
Yeah, a Translantau. I think that's Hong Kong or Taipei or somewhere like that. This Translantau race. There's another race in South Korea I fancy doing, but these are kind of quite expensive things. I'm not one of the rich coaches, so I have to be a little bit careful with the money because this is all I've got. I haven't got a pension, I haven't got, you know, many savings. But yeah, I'm going to maybe next year go back to South Africa and do a race in the Drakensberg. But I haven't got this, you know, I'm not like wanting to do all the big ones. It'd be nice to go and do hard rock, but at the moment I'm not confident in my ability to run for that distance in the mountains to be worth me doing it. I mean, I accidentally got into Western States. I didn't plan to get in so soon. I had never ran more than 100k, and I'd only done that twice. And it's like, oh fuck, I'm in Western States. What do I do now? You know.
That debugger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was like, somebody gave me an entry. It was luck. I didn't. A friend of somebody I coached didn't want his entry, and they gave me his entry. Basically, he'd won the entry in a raffle. You know, you can buy an entry. Well, not buy,
Yeah.
buy a raffle. He'd won it, and it's transferable. He just gave it me as a gift. Yeah, I'm just very lucky. It's why I didn't drop out. I should have dropped out. I didn't drop out because it was, yeah, I owed it to that guy to actually finish the fucking game.
Totally. Yeah, well, my
got
Swiss
too many,
Alps was to get the Hard Rock qualifier. That was the carrot for me. That's kind of dictated quite a lot of the 100-milers that I have run
yeah,
in
I
the
coach people
Alps
that
and
want to do
things.
hard rock. Yeah, hard rock's hard to. There's not many qualifying races, and they're all really horrible, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I kind of joke that most of the European qualifiers are, bar the altitude, harder than hard rock.
Yeah, I mean, there's a race. I did the shorter version. There's a race in Bulgaria called Pirin. I did the 60K. It was brutal. I could not imagine running 170K in the Pirin Mountains in Bulgaria. It was just Lord. Yeah, hard rock is not. You know, the winner was like 34 hours in that. I remember that. They were, you know, hardly anybody finished the Pirin, and the people who did finish looked like I don't want to say what was in my head there, but they look like corpses finishing. Nobody looked good. They weren't celebrating and doing a dance. They were just like, thank God that's over. I just want to die now. You know, these are the best runners. But yeah, there's a guy I coach, two guys I coach who are quite keen to do hard rock. Both the two Joshes. Coach two guys called Josh, and they both Big Josh is doing Reunion Diagonal de Fou this year. That's a race I'd like to be able to do one day because there's historic reasons for that. But I was left out of the team for the World Champs in 1998 which was in Reunion, and I was really peed off because I was like by far the best mountain runner, and it was very political picking mountain running teams in the UK. I wasn't picked for the team, and I really want to go and see Reunion because I feel a bit. It's a place I'd love to see. There's a character, I wouldn't say hero, but one of the guys I really, whose attitude I really like is a guy called Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that guy. I've always loved his travel show, and I'm kind of like that. And he, one of his shows, he goes to Reunion. It just looks kind of fun. He looks fantastic. But a lot of places I want to visit are inspired by places he's visited. Especially South Korea.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like South Korea just looks crazy. They just look crazy.
Yeah.
That looks so much fun. Really does.
All of those travel shows that he did are available on YouTube still. Yeah, good watch. And I've read that his book Kitchen Confidential. It was a good read as well.
Yeah, he's
interesting
a really,
guy.
I think I like to coach people that want to travel. Travel broadens the mind, doesn't it? Although there's a lot of. It's important to go. I've lived in a lot. I've lived in Kenya. I've lived in a lot of countries, and I think people actually need to go to third world countries. They need to visit these places, and it might give them a bit more appreciation of what they do have. Make them not quite so moany.
Yeah, coming from Ireland, Northern Ireland, I've always had the opinion that the people that left Northern Ireland, because I'm from the north, people that left Northern Ireland even for university or for a job and come back more understanding, more accepting, more, open to other things are fine. We don't have to agree, etc., etc. So travel broadens the mind, as they say.
It's really important. It's a luxury few people have. I think it's one we should use,
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a nice place to end it. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, no, it's been. I'm sorry it's gone on so long, but I did warn you.
I was warned. I didn't know that your conversation would outlast my AirPods.
Yeah, well done to anybody who survived the whole thing.
Yeah, it's getting on to be a long run now. So anyway, look, Martin, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
No worries. No worries.
Chat soon.
Yeah. Okay. Bye then.
All right.